Okay, there's a brief agenda there in front of you. These are the areas that we're going to be focusing on. I think that the title of the presentation was focused more on microfinance, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about our agriculture and production portfolio, which is an important portfolio for us, and it's actually growing now. So I've included it also in the agenda, as well as some discussion about our capacity building funds. Just a little bit of background on Oikocredit Peru. Again, the office is based in Lima. It's a regional office, and from that office we manage the portfolio for Oikocredit in Peru, in Ecuador, and Colombia. Although we have staff also in the other two countries, but the supervision comes from the office in Lima. It's been operating since 2005, and there are the names of the staff that are based in Peru. Excellent, highly qualified staff, and without them, I couldn't get the job done that we were able to do. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned them as well. A little bit of background about the markets in Peru. In general, Peru is a country that's had significant growth over the past 10 years. It's averaged about 7 to 8% per year in GDP. It's one of the highest growing countries and one of the fastest growing countries in the world. This obviously is an important factor in terms of the overall development of the microfinance market and the potential to do microfinance in the country. The microfinance market in general is very diverse. As you can see, there's 40 regulated and 34 non-regulated MFIs. That's about 75 in total countrywide, with a portfolio close to about 8 million. Actually, that's 800 million, excuse me. There's some zeros missing there. Clients close to 3 million now, and the type of methodologies that are supported include solidarity group lending and village banking and individual loans. Credit and savings unions also represent an important part of the microfinance market. There's some statistics on what they represent. And then the fair trade and organic cooperative associations also. Peru is blessed with a very strong community-based organization movement that's been around for many, many years. And the result has been that we have a lot of farmer associations that are fairly strong institutionally that allow us to work with them, and they're focused on all kinds of different agricultural products. A lot of it is coffee and cocoa, but there's also tropical fruits like banana and mango. And these are the kinds of initiatives that we're trying to move into more as we diversify our portfolio. And speaking of our portfolio, as you can see from that slide, we're at about 34 million as of September 2011. That's 34 million euros with 40 active projects. Of the 40, 13 are agricultural fair trade and organic agriculture projects, and 27 are MFIs, of which 4 are with savings and credit unions. And right there you get a better picture of where Peru stands in the overall Oikocredit portfolio. This information is actually a bit outdated now because of, I'm sure you all have heard a little bit about the India crisis. So India, as of December 2010, was at 70 million, but since then it's dropped, and actually the Peru portfolio has increased. So we're now about the number 4 sized portfolio for Oikocredit worldwide. It's a very, very important portfolio for Oikocredit because of its size, because of its diversity, and because of its potential for growth. And then overall, this slide gives you a better idea of the sorts of projects that we're really trying to focus on, not only in Oikocredit Peru, but Oikocredit in general. Both financial and social return are key. Our investors, our stakeholders, associate with Oikocredit, obviously not only for the financial return, which is a stable 2%, but also because they're looking for significant social impact. So obviously that translates into the kinds of projects that we focus on. We look for projects that target the poor, And in that regard, we're also looking and implementing instruments that measure the levels of poverty of our clients. Charlene, in her introduction, mentioned one, which is the Grameen Bank PPI, the Progress Out of Poverty tool. We're also looking for projects that provide a positive quality of life change that have a high social impact on the lives of the clients. So beyond whether or not they received the service from the project, we want to see if these clients actually had quality of life changes. Is there better education for their children? Do they have better access to health services? Have they improved their housing conditions? Is there more food on their plates during the daytime, during the day? These kinds of things are more difficult to measure, but we try also to incorporate tools and measurements that allow us to see if this kind of impact also is taking place. I must say that this really does differentiate us quite significantly from a large majority of the other so-called social investors that really don't make as much of an effort as Oikocredit does or invest as much as Oikocredit does in these kinds of issues. And clearly, another very important aspect is that the project does not harm the environment. I think we're trying to move even beyond that and looking at projects that actually have a positive impact on the environment. But we're still not quite there yet, but we're moving in that direction. These are some of the factors that we take into consideration when we're choosing our project partners. Clearly, they have to have some kind of positive experience in the activity. We don't really support startups. We do have a small fund called OSCAP that we use to invest in new enterprises, but it is a small amount. The large majority of our projects are with institutions or partners that have some kind of track record. The ideal is that there at least be 3 years of positive experience. Targeting poor clients is also key for us, and in that regard we look for rural over urban. That's not to say that we don't also support urban, but in Peru specifically, in the MFI market, more than anything else, we're seeing that those markets are completely saturated now. There's a high level of competition, and really the focus that we're trying to take is to support MFIs that are looking at expanding their services in rural areas. More for anything else for a larger amount of financial inclusion. Clearly, transparent and fair pricing is a very important issue for us in our partner selection. Peru is a country that is also blessed with an excellent credit bureau where there's a lot of very good information that's reported on MFI clients. Also, our partnership with MFI Transparency has been a partnership in place for about 5 years now, whereby we're actually using the MFI Transparency tool during the process of due diligence in each one of our projects to ensure that the interest rate that's being charged is generally within the market range for that country. In the case of Peru, the average rate is at around 31 to 32% now. And actually, if you look at that rate compared to rates worldwide, it's quite low, and it has to do a lot with the very competitive environment in the Peru microfinance industry. And another very important aspect for us is that the institution at least have a very clear vision and mission that focuses on the type of impact that they want to have with the clients that they're working with, and that vision and mission coincides to a certain extent with the vision and mission that Oikocredit has. Taking it one step further than that, if beyond the vision and mission they have a social performance strategy in place, even better. However, many institutions, especially the smaller ones that are focused on rural areas, haven't gotten as far as developing a strategy, so we're also willing to support them in the development of their strategy through our technical assistance funds. Now to give you just a few examples, a couple of examples of what we consider to be sort of prototype ideal microfinance partners in Peru. Here's a general slide on what the microfinance portfolio looks like today. Just a couple of highlights. You notice that it is a mix of institutions. We have NGOs, we have non-bank MFIs, we also have one bank that we're supporting, and 4 cooperatives. The portfolio is at 24 million euros. The par rate is an excellent 0%. Actually, that's Peru is the only country in the entire Oikocredit world, to the best of my knowledge, it has a par of 0%. That means that our portfolio at risk, par is portfolio at risk, is 0. We have 100% repayment on all of our loans. Part of that has to do, obviously, with the due diligence that we implement with our partners and the monitoring that we do and the partner selection, but also it has to do with the dynamics of the market itself. It's a very dynamic, competitive market and high growth market, and the institutions are very skilled in what they do. So they're able to keep the payments up, which is also good for Oikocredit. And we also have 2 equity investments. Obviously, apart from loans, we do equity investments with these 2 institutions, Confianza and Prisa. And this is what we offer: loans, equity investments, and technical assistance. I'll talk a little bit more about technical assistance in a minute. This is the first one, NGO Prisma. That's a nonprofit organization that was actually established in 1980. They've been a partner with us of ours since 2006. Why is it an ideal? It's ideal because, first of all, they really are one of the best institutions in terms of managing their double and their triple bottom line. And when I talk about double bottom line, I'm talking about both financial and social returns, and the triple includes environment. And Prisma has, from the onset, very, very much focused on both areas. We're supporting them very strongly with our technical assistance fund in further development of their social performance management strategy. This tool that I mentioned earlier, the PPI, they're one of the founding users of this tool in Peru. They're now using it very actively to measure on a semi-annual basis their clients, the targeting of their clients. Their vision includes targeting the very poor, so they want to make sure that the services that they're providing are focusing on those clients that are at or near the poverty line in Peru. A large portion of their portfolio is focused in rural areas, 45%, and the large majority is focused on women, 67%. And as you can see, 31% of their clients are under the poverty line. And 50% of their clients are exclusive. I mentioned earlier the term financial inclusion. This is what I refer to as bancarización in parentheses. Basically what that means is that half of the clients of Prisma are first-time and unique and sole clients only with Prisma, which is a very good figure given the fact that, again, we have a lot of MFIs competing for the same kinds of clients. So that's an indication of Prisma's move towards areas that are very underserved, and that's something that Oikocredit places great importance on. Finally, they're also implementing with us, through our support, and in a collaboration with a group out of California called Freedom from Hunger, a new health and microfinance product that adds more value to the kinds of impact that we're hoping to get with the clients. And another prototype would be the NGO Finca Peru. Finca is a U.S.-based network that has affiliates all over the world. They have been a client of ours since 2009, and as you can see, they even have a much higher reach with women than Prisma. They're at almost 90% in terms of women, and 34% of their new clients are under the poverty line, and 60% are exclusive. So again, we have a significant amount of financial inclusion taking place with this institution, and it's something, again, that Oikocredit very much supports and looks for in their partners. And they're also another one that's included in this collaboration with Freedom from Hunger to add more value to their products through health services as well. So given that situation, I wanted to focus now a bit more on our agricultural portfolio. Here is give you an idea of some of the products that we support through our agricultural portfolio. The majority of our projects are coffee projects because, in fact, there are a lot of associations in Peru that grow coffee and have been able to access international markets, particularly fair trade markets. But we also have a significant amount in cocoa as well. Some of the new areas that we're looking at are bananas and sugarcane and jam. The large majority of these projects are credit lines. They're the amounts, the range of amounts, and the number and type of organizations that we work with in this portfolio. Some examples, we have Cepi Café, which was the first one that we started with. They're a fairly large cooperative focusing on coffee, cocoa, sugarcane, and jam. They are certified by FLO, which is the Fair Trade certification organization based out of Europe, and all of their production is organic. And the same can be told for the organization Naranjillo, which is also another cooperative located in the southern part of Peru, which also includes cocoa and coffee. Fair trade, as I mentioned, is a key area for us in agriculture. Again, we have credit lines with these fair trade organizations. I would say probably about 95% of our projects in Peru in agriculture are linked with fair trade markets in Europe and the United States. And of course, one of the advantages of this is that with the certification from fair trade, there are certain standards that the different associations have to meet, including environmental standards, workplace standards, and different kinds of social impact that the fair trade organizations expect that the association will have on the lives of the clients. So this is really key for us because with that certification, we're guaranteed that the funds that are going to be received by the association will be distributed fairly and the way they should be amongst the members of the organization. Here's a little bit more information on the fair trade portfolio. That UTZRA, those are buyers and fair trade organizations based in Europe that we work with. Of course, it's a portfolio that requires a lot of intensive labor on the part of Oikocredit in terms of permanent contact with our international buyers. And why is that? Because obviously most of these associations, practically all of them, don't have real guarantees that they can offer us in terms of the loans that we give them or the credit lines that we can give them. So basically the guarantee that we have are the contracts that they sign with the buyers in the different countries around the world. So normally the structure is one whereby once the payment is being made by the buyer to the association, it flows through Oikocredit first so that Oikocredit can receive its payment for its loan, and then Oikocredit distributes the remaining amount to the association locally in Peru so that they can distribute the funds directly to their members. So that's why it's very, very important not only for us to maintain contact with associations locally and the members, but also the buyers overseas. Here are some of the issues related to impact that I mentioned before in the fair trade organizations. Of course, there's very high outreach in the rural areas, which is an area of importance, as I mentioned before. Lots of empowerment taking place of farmers and their families. There's an increased income. Maybe more importantly even, there's a guaranteed minimum price and a special bonus for the organizations that are included in fair trade. So as opposed to what normally happens in these markets where farmers are subject to price volatility and a lot of insecurity in terms of whether or not there's going to be buyers, here they're guaranteed, and they're also guaranteed a bonus. Finally, I wanted to mention a little bit about our capacity building funds, which is another area of great importance for Oikocredit and also an area that differentiates us from, again, from a large majority of the social investors. We have funds available to provide training, planning exercises, exchanges, and support in local fairs for our agricultural portfolio, but also for our MFI portfolio. We've supported a lot of social performance work through these capacity building funds. For example, what I mentioned before, the PPI, where we now have, in my region in particular, 25 institutions reporting poverty data. A lot of that has been kick-started by Oikocredit capacity building funds. So it's a very, very key component of our service delivery. Again, it differentiates us greatly from a large majority of the social investors and makes clients want to come back to us because it's an extra bonus for them. These funds were provided only to institutions that work directly with Oikocredit. And with that, I just want to thank you, and let's open this up for questions.
Great. So at the bottom of your screen again, there is a function for typing in questions. If you could go ahead and start to take questions that way or pose questions that way, that would be actually very helpful. And then we will look to begin to, if you raise your hand and you want to articulate your question, unmute individual participants. So there are two ways in which you can do this. You can raise your hand, and then we can see that function, or you can post your question in the bottom of the field.
Well, I guess everything was clear.
Sounds easier. Great. So I don't see any hands going up, so I'll just take one more shot at this just to make sure. Oh, actually, that's not true. It's just a delayed reaction. So I do see Rick's handed up, and we have a few questions, it seems. So I'm going to unmute. Rick, you should be able to speak. So if you could go ahead. It might just be a delayed. Go ahead.
Can you hear me on the mic?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, because I sent one via the type in the space. Can you tell us more about the capacity building fund? How does that work?
Yes, certainly. The capacity building funds are basically available for all Oikocredit offices to provide funding support to partners. The amounts of funding are fairly flexible. In terms of capacity building, we're focusing mainly on three areas. The first one is what I mentioned before, social performance, whereby we use the funds to strengthen the capacity of our MFI partners in the area of social performance. Another area is product development, where we're very much focusing on supporting partners to diversify their products for greater financial inclusion. What does that mean? That basically means that we want products out there, whether they be financial products or non-financial products, that promote the entrance of potentially new clients that don't have access to financial or non-financial services. So those are the kinds of products that we want to try to support with our capacity building funds. And then a third area is more general, where basically depending on the needs of our clients, whether they be MFIs or agricultural organizations, we're able to cater the funds for strengthening a particular area that they may have a need for. So we try to keep that flexibility because, of course, there is a wide array of needs many times. In terms of amounts, they can be small. They can be 5,000 euro grants, but we also have larger projects of about 100,000 euros. So that's generally an idea. Just to give you, in the case of Peru, our annual budget for capacity building in 2011 was about 250,000 euros.
Great.
Thank you. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes, yes, we can.
Could you, one of the aspects that's been emphasized by Oikocredit is measuring social performance, but we understand that this is both a drain on the resources of the project partners doing it, and also they need training. Can you give us any sort of metric as to what the allocation of resources should be ideally for measuring either PPI or some other measurement?
Yeah, I can give you an idea. Let's look at the PPI. Maybe we'll use Prisma as a case in point, since it was one of the ones that was presented there. Oikocredit, we started working the PPI with Prisma in 2008, and Prisma pilot tested the PPI through a grant provided by our capacity building funds of about 5,000 euros. Added to that, their contribution, the pilot for the PPI, which took place for over a 3-month period, cost about 10,000 euros in total. The pilot ended, and they started implementation of the PPI, first with a sample of their client base, because we're talking about a client base of over 30,000 clients. So first they started the PPI with a sample of about 1,000 clients. And then they've expanded now to doing a wider survey of all of their new clients that are coming in, implementing the PPI tool. So generally speaking, and this of course is not an exact figure, but apart from the initial startup cost that I mentioned, they're spending about 1% of their budget per year on implementation of the PPI. Does that sort of give you a metric?
Yes, it does. Thank you. That's very
Okay.
helpful.
Great. Frank, if you could just perhaps comment on the trade-off. There's often this question raised about the cost of social performance or social impact. But from the Prisma experience, there has been benefits. They've had lessons learned that they would not have otherwise gained unless they were using the tool. So if you could talk about kind of more of the, so there's certainly a cost, but what happens on the benefit side?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you're defining benefit, but there's clearly a business case argument for social performance as well. Going back to Prisma, again, with the PPI as an example, they wanted to use the PPI to measure whether or not they were really achieving their vision and mission as an institution, which includes targeting the very poor. They had used other tools, but they weren't satisfied, so they tried the PPI. They came up with the results, and they found that they're not achieving the depth of outreach that they had hoped. So what have they done? They've made changes to their products so that they can focus more on greater financial inclusion and targeting the poorer clients. As a result, the amount of clients that they have has increased substantially from 2008 to 2010, and the amount of clients that they were looking for has increased substantially. So the benefit to Prisma has obviously been an increased outreach, a larger client base, and obviously the benefit to the client is that there's now many more that are accessing the services that otherwise wouldn't have been if it hadn't been for a tool like the PPI or other sort of social performance management tools.
Great. And could you also comment on Oikocredit's, I guess, ESG scorecard and how the benefit that partners receive for strong social performance?
Well, Charlene mentioned the ESG scorecard, which is basically a tool that we use during the process of due diligence to measure the degree of social performance that the potential partner is achieving. It's a score, and there's a range with the results being either very poor or great in social performance, and it's a screening tool more than anything else, because obviously if after implementing that tool in the due diligence process we find that a partner is very poor and has absolutely no plans of getting any better, we discard them as a potential partner. But also what the tool helps to do is to assess the strengths and weaknesses in the areas of social performance that the partner has. So the tool is a benefit for the client, for our partner, because through the tool, we can also channel some of our capacity building funds to strengthen some of those areas that have been seen as weaknesses during the process of due diligence.
Great. So we do have some questions in the field. So I'm going to read the one from Peter, and I'm actually going to open up Peter's line in case he wants to add anything else. So the question here is, do you consider human rights, or are there no issues when you make investment decisions? And so Peter Larson, I'm opening up your line. So if you can address that question, Frank, and if Peter, you want to add any clarifying comments, you can go ahead and do so.
Okay, well,
wow. Any human rights issues in Peru, Ecuador, but I imagine there might be some in Colombia. And I think there might be, in terms of having a positive social impact, you might run into problems if you are supporting, for example, a community that is not irrespective of human rights. But then again, I'm not sure whether this is really an issue in the field.
Yeah. Okay, to be honest, it's not an area that we focus on strongly, human rights, but clearly, during the process of due diligence and partner selection, we do a very, very thorough analysis, not only of the institution, but the environment and the community surrounding the institution as well. I'm trying to think if there have ever been any cases where we've actually gone to community and found that there have been violations of human rights, particularly in Peru, and I can't say that we have, but certainly if there was that kind of issue, it would play in very important in terms of whether or not we choose to support or not. I can say that it may not necessarily be human rights directly, but we do support what is called client protection principles with all of our MFIs. And these principles are related to human rights in terms of that they talk about things like the right of the client to have transparency in their interest rate structure, the right of the client to ensure that their information is private, the right of the client to what happened? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. The right of the client to have fair and respectful treatment on the part of the institution. So these also are really fundamental human rights in the area of finance and microfinance that are driving principles for every single investment that we make. Now, you mentioned Colombia. Obviously, we have a history there of horrible human rights violations. I can say right now it is an area that we're very wary of in Colombia. For example, right at the moment, we still have a small portfolio there, and we don't really work too much in what would be called the red areas of Colombia, where there's still guerrillas, more anything else for security purposes, no? But if we were to go in those areas, then clearly it would be something that we would have to keep in mind. I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but at least it's an attempt.
It's very helpful. Actually, I thought of an example. For example, if you go to Uganda with a very strict anti-homosexual laws, it's kind of like, is that really a place we want to be? But of course, that's a completely other continent, so it's not really relevant here. But that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Great. So the next question we have is from Glenn Makushin. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. So the question here is, you mentioned about the rates in Peru being around 30%. Why are we investing at such a low rate through microplays? And so Glenn, I'm going to open up your line. So Frank, I think the important thing here is to distinguish the rates within the market versus the rates that investors receive, and tie the rate of market to cost of capital when MFIs borrow, because there's a differentiating factor between the MFI doing the borrowing and the client themselves.
Yeah.
So Glenn, I'm going to open up your line, and Frank, I may actually jump in if you feel
okay.
that I need to.
All right.
Great. So Glenn, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
I've opened up your line. So So when you think about the cost of capital to an MFI, there are various factors. And when you think about the cost of capital to clients, there are another series of factors. Okay, so we're mixing two separate things here. The rate of 30% is the rate of cost of capital within the Peruvian market. I think that was the rate that Frank referenced. So in essence, that's the rate that you would have to borrow at in that market. That rate includes a lot of different things. So within the microfinance sector, we talk about the high operating expense that that is taken in order to serve the clients that we do. You can't simply go down the street and reach a client. You sometimes have to hike 3 hours on a motorcycle, maybe walk through the woods in some mountains. So there's a very high operating cost that is often embedded within the cost to clients themselves. But beyond that, there's also obviously the cost within that market. So even if you think about today in the U.S. context of what we borrow, which is a very different market, when you look at rates for credit cards, for example, or a personal loan today, those rates are often within 20-30% within the U.S. market. If you look at something like the housing market, we see that the rates are lower. So you're going to have a lot of diversification around interest rates offered to clients, but that wasn't essentially an average number within the Peruvian market. Now, as it relates to investors, Oikocredit's position is simply this. We do not, it is not our position to make money on the backs of poor people. That's just, we're not going to offer extremely high interest rates to investors to make more money on poor people. If we offered you 20%, let's say, as an investor, that 20% gets passed on in addition to the operating cost that is faced within the local context to the end borrower. So it is not our position to do that, and there are other organizations within the microfinance sector that try to go for what they consider more of an emerging market rate of return. But our position as a social investor, and because we are a cooperative in the nature of our structure, so our cooperative structure actually defines the rate of interest that we offer to investors. So we have 595 members in our cooperative, and each year they vote on whether or not to increase that rate or leave it in place. That 2% rate that we offer through Microplace has actually been in place for, I think, about 20 years now. And in this particular climate, obviously compared to other rates of return in the U.S. market, it's actually very comparable to, actually it's better than what you would get on a savings account or a CD in many cases. So I don't know if that clarifies for you, but you're mixing two different things, and I just wanted to make sure that that could be recognized. Have I answered your question, Glenn?
Yes, it just seems to be an awfully huge difference between the market rate and the rate we get on our accounts, the 28% difference.
Well, there isn't really 28%. No one is making that 28% profit. There's a whole cost of capital that gets into that. And if you, we're trying to actually do more education on this pricing transparency issue because this is what this is a part of. We have a blog series on the issue of that on our website. So that might be a helpful place to start to get a better handle around this particular issue. But there are lots of things to operating the business that goes into that 30%. That 2% that our investors get is on top of doing the cost of doing business. So you have to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great. So I think there's also, let's see. So Charlotte Lott, who is actually with one of our support associations here, asked, why is the Peruvian economy growing so fast? And Charlotte, I'm going to open up your line in case, growing so fast right now, I'm going to open up your line in case you would like to add anything.
Okay, I'm here.
Great, we can hear you, Charlotte.
Okay, good. I just teach economic development, and Frank said that the Peruvian economy is growing fast right now, so I was curious to know if he knew why that was happening.
Yeah, it's really because Peru is a country that's extremely mineral rich in gold, copper, iron, and other such things. So as a mineral-rich, commodity-based country, Peru exports a significant amount to places like China. And as you know, China has been the economic driver for the world over the past 10 years now. So this has had a direct effect on the Peruvian growth rate. Of course, the risk is now that since we are so commodity-driven, that as China goes, Peru goes. So we're all sort of hoping and praying that China continues to grow at similar or close to similar rates, because it does have a direct effect on our economy as well. That's the fundamental reason.
But then is it just a commodity boom? Because boom and busts are problematic, right? Or is it more widespread than that?
Well, I mean, Peru is trying to diversify. But the weakness of Peru in terms of its economic structure has always been that it's very, very much commodity-based. Over the past 10 years, there has been further diversification. For example, tourism is now booming. It's a huge industry in Peru, and it represents a fairly important portion of the GDP, but still nowhere near as much as the commodities. Things like fishing and agriculture also. So it is a weakness, and every government that comes and goes recognizes it. I think we finally have a government that's trying to do something about it. At least we hope.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So I think you answered both of Charlotte's questions as I see them here. All right. From Alyssa. So Alyssa is our intern here in the office. Alyssa asks, are the technical staff working with our MFI partners in Peru local to the area? And also, what type of programs for women's empowerment exists? So what type of programs for women's empowerment exist in Peru, and are the staff local?
Are the staff in the Peru office local?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's an easy one, yes. All of them are local. As far as women's empowerment, we have been working over the past 3 years with a network called WIMAN, not women, WIMAN, which is a Latin American network for gender and women's empowerment. And what have we been doing with them? We, through our technical assistance funds, have been supporting initiatives to implement tools that have been developed for MFIs to be able to empower women. So, I mean, it's a rather long explanation, but the short summary is that we have 6 MFIs that are implementing these tools. The idea, basically, of these tools is, to first strengthen the capacity of the women, the clients of the MFIs, to be able to understand what their situation in the household is in terms of their level of empowerment, to be able to recognize the strengths and weaknesses, and through the tools and through training, to be able to have a stronger position in the household, actually through the loan that they're receiving from the MFI. So it is sort of a very specific, concrete tool, and actually there's a publication that just came out on the results of the use of this tool, which we'd be happy to share with Alyssa and anyone else that may want it.
Great. Let me just make sure that Alyssa doesn't have any follow-up questions. Alyssa, I've just opened your line. Is that good for you?
I had to get my last question.
Alyssa?
Are you online?
I believe I'm online. Hello.
Yes. So does that respond to your question? Is that sufficient?
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Let's see. So Paul, I'm just finding you in the list, and oh, Paul is not here anymore. He may have actually asked his question, I'm not certain. So let's see. Let's see, there is Malhone. Malhone, I'm opening up your line. His question is, do you provide training of trainers in financial education for your partners?
Yeah. We're just actually getting started on a potential collaboration with the Center for Financial Inclusion here in Washington to implement a program in the future in financial education. We haven't done a lot yet in terms of at least not in my region.
Malhone, I opened up your line. Does that answer your question?
I have a little trouble with the audio here. I'm sorry. It's like feedback or something, but I couldn't hear the answer.
Okay. Frank, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, the answer basically is we haven't done that much on it yet. However, we recognize that it's a very, very important aspect towards financial inclusion. So we're looking at a possible collaboration with an organization based here in Washington to implement a larger, wide-scale program in financial education with them. But we don't have much to report yet because we haven't done that much on it.
Is that organization Microfinance Opportunities?
No, it very well could be the Center for Financial Inclusion.
Oh, that's Acción, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, but it's still tentative. It's nothing definite yet. No, we're still looking at the possibility.
Yeah, I just asked the question because it's certainly a way to mitigate risk, and it's the MFI approach. It's 5 pillars, all of which allow a family to organize and manage their finances better, which is providing service to the family, but it also is a way for the institution to mitigate risk. And all of your partners, it seems to me all of your partners would want to be involved in something like that. So that's the reason for the question.
No, it's an important question, but I guess, it also raises a lot of challenging issues. Like, for example, who's going to actually provide the financial education? Are we expecting MFIs that are specialized in the delivery of financial services to also take on these new services that are costly and they're not very skilled at it? So that's the first question. Or can we rely on public sector or the private sector in individual countries to provide this? In the case of Peru, I'm not aware of a lot of really good programs that are out there on financial education. Although in the education sector now, at school age, they in the new curriculum for the public school systems in Peru, they are including financial education. But of course, the impact that that's going to have is going to be sort of medium term and not immediate. So I mean, these are sort of the burning, challenging questions that we have to look at how to implement such a thing. No, I'm just now in a conference this week with the SEEP network here in Washington, where financial education has been a major issue that's been discussed as one of the areas that needs to be implemented fairly soon to expand our financial inclusion. So I think it's an area that's growing. We just have to figure out how to do it.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, thank you. So we have to wrap up because it's 2 minutes to 1, and the way I think our system works is that the call will simply end. So there are 3 questions remaining. What is PPI? What is ESG? And those questions will actually write responses back and circulate. And there's also a question on what are the environmental issues our partners deal with in Peru. So we'll provide responses to those outstanding questions by writing, and if anyone has any additional questions that they'd like to raise, you can email us at usa@oikocredit.org. We would like to thank you all for participating in today's session, and we hope that you found it useful. And do stay tuned for future events that we'll hold as our staff from the field travel to the U.S. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Goodbye. Thank you.